I'm sorry I'm not able to attend in person today. I don't know if you can hear me. If that's okay. I know that the sound is off in your side, but
Is it
hopefully
on
I'm
now,
not
Chris?
interrupting.
Chris, can you hear us at all, Chris?
Yeah, I can now. Thank you.
Yep.
I will be off camera because I do actually have a meeting, client meeting that I'll be attending at the same time.
Okay, thanks for letting us know.
Yep.
We're still waiting for a couple more members to show up.
Ellen will probably be.
Go to the river up there sometime when
You know, I-
I'm the meeting chair for this month. And on our agenda, we had a town manager updates, but Audra is not able to join us today. She has another meeting, so we're going to skip into discussion items. We're going to run this a little different. Deb worked hard on this.
I had helped.
Deb and help. Worked hard on this, trying to kind of do a rundown after our public meetings, looking at what the questions were that came out of those and how we need to address those. And then what are the priorities for this group to do that? So I think the idea, and Deb, you can comment on this, but I think what the idea was, the first one was to establish what issues and questions were raised by the public during the meeting and try to document them up here in no particular order. And then after we've agreed to that, use some dots to kind of figure out which ones have priorities.
Tyler, the only qualification would be, it doesn't have to be an exhaustive list. On the agenda, it says, should be addressed, which means most important for us to address in order to increase the public's understanding. So it's not, we have a full list of what the public reported to us. We have a type list, and it's your going through those and the way where you think it's most important for us to provide more information.
Do you think, Deb, it makes sense to walk through the questions and answers that were documented?
The ones that were written up,
Yes,
all the members of the group have seen them. They're
correct.
It's long. They're 2 and 3 pages long.
I agree.
So they can be attached to anything that comes up in the record at this meeting.
Okay.
But I think it would take too long, given what's on the agenda.
Okay.
And everybody here has seen those lists. You have
I
not.
had to do an email snafu. I've been missing committee emails for months and months, it turns out.
I took your
We-
bad one off my
We
list.
figured it out today.
Oh, because
So-
of the
That is why.
main
Welcome
sport
back,
one?
Seth.
Oh
So
my
many funny-
gosh.
So many funny comments. And,
Huh.
nonetheless, sort of up to speed, but
You've got
I'll
the
play
one-
along.
You got all the lists.
I mean, I
That
received it
latest
this
one.
morning. I just wasn't able to devote the hours in between to reading.
That explains your quietness.
Yeah.
So Deb, everybody's seen
Wow.
the comments from the 22nd as well as the 30th?
Yeah, I sent it out.
Okay.
Deb, do you want to write things down as people
Yeah, I
talk
think
about them?
my middle school teacher. who was
I think that's a
sharp handwriting better than
great
mine.
idea.
I have years of making people squint. That's it.
I think it would be helpful. I didn't have time to do this, but I think it would be helpful to do like a quick analysis and just write up like a synopsis of what we found out from these questions. You know, like what questions were asked several times.
Well,
You could just put it into
that's what
AI
this-
and AI could
That's what this
help us.
should do.
Right, but I'm saying, I think in general, we should have a write-up available for the public, but also for ourselves to kind of like wrap our heads around it. I just kind of had to
But we'll
read
have-
through, but
We'll have the charts.
Yeah.
As a record of the lists
Charts.
and the priority,
Yeah.
these.
Okay.
What we're about to do.
yes.
Okay.
I'm saying yes and I think we should do it proper. More,
Well, is someone willing to take
I'm
the
willing to
minutes?
do it. Yeah, I mean,
You are?
yeah, I wish I had had time. I would have done it before, but because I think it's hard to wrap your head around just by reading it all. But maybe I'm wrong, and that's just the way my brain works. But yeah.
Well,
I think it would be
this will
helpful
help
to
us
do
to
before
pull out what
this
we
meeting.
felt like was a really, things that were important questions or things we didn't really have an answer to. Some of them were somewhat redundant to other ones. Some of them were really just feedback versus questions. Some of it
Yeah.
has already been answered in other ways. So this will hopefully sort of define what from that
Yeah.
we don't already have put together. So
I think a big one for me, Alfie, is understanding grants
yes.
and their application to different approaches to dam structures. Because I think it's an unknown, and it doesn't seem like anyone's willing to stick their head out there and be like, you're going to get 100% of your money.
Right.
Or like, and I realize that no one's going to know that answer right now, but I think it's important. I think there's a lot of voters in our town that are concerned about the tax implications of any decision that's made by the town. And I think it's very hard for them to vote on a project with either A, without bounds whether you're voting on something that actually has bounds as far as how much money you'd be willing to spend as a taxpayer, or at least understanding how grants fall into that.
I think that.
Critical. I'm sorry, with that, can you just add after grants / tax impact? Because I think that's not just understanding grants, but how much are the taxpayers going to have to fork over time? Yeah.
I think that Bina framed it pretty nicely in one of the meetings in response to that question. Essentially saying that we could, whatever recommendation, put within that wording that it is contingent upon a certain percentage or amount of funding so that nobody would be, without question committed to something and then not have any money be available. So I think that could potentially be part of the way that we word a recommendation, if that's the direction we go, that there's, we wouldn't go this way if it were this amount of money fully on taxpayer. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
But the other thing I think we also need to know is what options exist for funding for high hazard dams. We're looking at the whole river,
Right.
and the high hazard dams are going to be something that are going to impact all of us as well and need repair. So what are the options that exist for that as well?
Right, and we did figure some of that out
Yes.
between then and now, in some conversations and diving a little bit
Right.
deeper. So we do have some better answers to that.
But the question that I thought was telling on that point, Susan, was from the first session when someone asked what are the numbers or what's the percentage of the watershed above east and west dams or above the foot of the lake? And, the short answer or the long-winded answer was, nobody really knows, but it's the vast majority of the watershed that is above the first set of high hazard dams. So we have a high hazard dam issue. We have east and west dams that are in serious need of upgrade. They don't do their job in terms of protecting the town or keeping lake levels the way we want them all the time, the way we want them at the cost we want it done, and the same for Seabright. It's not doing the flood protection resilience work, and it's not doing the levels work that we all think they are. So those are costly upgrades.
Right.
Fish passage is being considered as a gateway to funding.
That's where we have to get
And
clear on.
Mike Burke did answer the question that it was something like 85%. I think.
87,
yeah,
87%,
yeah, we all
In
get
the mid that
Right. So it all is speaking to the importance of us focusing on an overall river project, including the high hazard dams and their dire need for upgrades, putting the town at risk if we don't.
Exactly, which is why I say that what are the options for all of the dams, not just Montgomery.
Right.
Yep.
First, a procedure question. Should we all have our green lights on? Is this being recorded? Because we
Yes.
may not have picked up everything that's been said.
Yes.
So, okay.
Secondly,
Like yours.
there was information given to Bina about FEMA grant possibilities and everything on those high hazard and Seabright dams. So that's something that we should get more information on.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, is we have looked a little bit more into those and what the parameters are, so we can discuss that further, maybe at a different time, but,
Yeah, and Audra has additional information. She just couldn't be here tonight.
In general, what I've seen with these grants is that it's about 10% match, but I've actually heard that sometimes they will forgo that match. And I don't know if we will match the criteria for that. That's just something to keep in mind. It's usually about 10%. We should do a deeper analysis to really look at it.
Yep.
And we also need to consider the fact that a lot of the infrastructure money that would fund a lot of this might be retracted during the next administration. So we really have to work quickly if we want that money.
So cost is obviously one really important issue.
Mhm.
Does anyone have another one?
I have another one. What will the river look like if the dam is taken down during high and low and medium flows?
You mean all along?
Montgomery?
All along.
Everything.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. What's going on with the 3D model? Does anyone know anything about that?
disappeared.
I think it disappeared.
I
Yeah.
think it disappeared. too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of was taken into the hands, I think, of the consultants, and then they weren't able
Yeah.
to work on it anymore. So
But can you clarify,
So this would be all along the river, and my question is, what will the river look like if one dam is removed, if perhaps
Oh, I
Knox
see.
and
Okay.
Knowlton are
Okay.
removed? How will it change? And then I guess also in conjunction with that, what plans are in the works for changing the Main Street Bridge? Or in other words, are there things that are going to be changed anyway that will also affect the river that?
gotcha.
Yeah, and there were a number of public comments wondering about specifically the water, what's the water going to look like in the harbor?
Yeah.
Coming down, specifically if the Montgomery Dam came down.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's a strong desire to have some clear visual idea. of what it looks like.
I would add that as far as the visuals go, they should be more line of sight than drone aerial views, because there's very few of us that fly that high. And really, so, I mean, that's how you're gonna look at the river, if you're standing
Well,
on.
would it be helpful
Or-
to go down, on a day where the impoundment is already drawn down for other work,
Mhm.
to maybe go upriver a little bit and take photos of what that looks like, because that's probably a pretty good representation of what the flow would look like. I mean, it won't represent every high and low level, but at least can give an image of wherever we are in that
But
point in
whatever is
time.
going on above that, the upper river,
Well, right,
For
that would
example,
only,
right now,
yeah, that would
not
only get up to
building-
Brewster Building, but I mean, that would be maybe
not
a
coming
start.
down
Yeah,
at all.
Right.
And so if we went tomorrow, if they were drawing it down, it wouldn't be representative of what the
Yeah.
river looks like.
I think the question that was raised, and I believe Phil was the one who raised it, is basically what would it look like in high, low, and medium or average flows of the river,
Right, which is
Right.
what I
Yeah.
thought I said.
which I thought was a very good question.
I think it would be so helpful to have a video rendering if possible. I don't know if people can do that, if that's like an engineering design
Somebody mentioned,
thing.
was it you?
Yeah, so, yeah, a company
On the end of
that
one
does
of the-
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a company name that I've never heard of.
Chang,
It's
Oh, Chang and
Ochang,
Pickle-
Puckerbush.
Puckerbush, yeah.
Great name.
Has anybody heard of them? know
Yes,
them?
I've heard of them.
Have you worked with them?
No, I haven't.
The question is, do we have money to do that?
Well, the first thing would be to have a conversation with them and find out how much money would be
Yeah.
required, or whether they could do what we want.
Does anyone want to?
Yeah, I'll comment.
All right.
Do you feel that that last question is important along every stretch of the river, or is it more important along certain stretches?
The only thing people are going to really decide on is Montgomery Dam.
Except the people upriver
Up.
have asked and
Asked,
are
right.
concerned
Yes,
about.
I understand that,
Because
yeah.
their shoreline is going to
Is
change
going to,
dramatically.
yes, right,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, fine. Can we move on to something else?
Yeah,
All right.
Well,
Oh,
just
okay,
one
go ahead,
more
Rick.
point on
Sure.
that, and that is that I know that Interfluve, when we were up there on the Knowlton Street Dam looking up into whatever you call that impoundment, he had people out doing depth tests.
Soundings.
Wow, it's some sort of technical thing with sticks and boats. And Mike seemed to have some confidence even at that point as to where the river would go, what it would look like, and was representing that those depth measurements that they were taking at that point would be usable in terms of trying to figure out what the section above Knowlton Street, basically from there up until we get up on this, I guess, conceivably up to Shirt Tail or Seabright.
Yeah, well, as far as the impoundment reaches.
What is the status of the Interfluve report? I think that would be helpful to understand, and what exactly is in that. We're still waiting for the next report.
Which report?
They're working on a report for us regarding flooding and like the next steps, the designs and the impacts, and it would be incredibly helpful to get that. I think they're including future. This is on my list of things to add to this was, looking at the future impacts of climate on precipitation and those impacts on all the dams, because in the current reports, it doesn't include that. It just has like the current status of the precipitation, not the future. So that's something I think for all of us that we need to know moving forward.
Yeah.
What will the impacts be of, you know, a worst case scenario, or even just like the 100-year flood, which is, as we've talked about, not
Not a
100-year
useful term,
flood
but
anymore.
yeah.
But yeah, what are the impacts on property, including public and private property, on the natural spaces? And I believe that that's what Interfluve is working on, but we haven't heard much about it.
Well, and I think that was
Yeah.
a question that was raised, maybe in writing or maybe just verbally, but with the dams being where they are, if you have a major flooding event, what is the liability to the town in a situation like that?
Yeah.
If it's a town-owned dam that then causes flooding, does that become then a town responsibility, or how does that
I thought that was
work?
such
Which
a
I
good
thought was an
question.
interesting question, yeah, so.
Say that again.
Well, the question was essentially if it's been defined that the dam is increasing flooding events,
Mhm.
if we have a catastrophic flooding event that damages, say, property in town
Mhm.
and is made worse by a town-owned dam, then is there some liability in that being caused by that structure that the town or the townspeople would then have to absorb? So it wasn't something I had personally thought about, so I thought it was an interesting question.
Yeah.
So Ray, did you have another question?
Not really a question, but an observation of, I was a little surprised with our 2 meetings and the results and everything like that, as to how few people commented or showed any preference for option B,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's clear that
lowering the
wasn't-
dam
Yeah.
and putting in a fish ladder. And I don't know where that leaves us. You know, because we've got 3 options that we're looking at least 3 options that we're looking at. So that's something for us to
That
decide.
was true in both of those.
Yeah.
Both mean,
Yes.
yeah, both.
Well, and my interpretation, which is, not scientific, but it seems like you have people who feel one way and you have people who feel another way,
Mhm.
and neither are particularly interested in the compromise option, especially at a higher cost. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I mean, it kind of puts the question, is that even one that's worth pursuing?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
people on either side wouldn't go for it, so.
And I think the compromise is pretty ugly.
I
throw it out there from an
no, I
aesthetic
agree,
standpoint.
I agree.
I mean, even when they've tried to
Mhm.
work it up in
Right.
Photoshop magic,
Yeah.
I still don't think it.
It's got
sells very
it's
well.
got a lot going on.
I also
Yeah.
wonder though, because we weren't allowed or able to give the exact costs and those numbers, if people saw the chart with the costs really high for the middle one and just said, oh, we shouldn't do that, but not knowing that some of that could have been, or a lot of it could be paid for by grants. I'm just wondering if, because we didn't talk about the costs exactly, if people,
Well,
interpreted
it's
things
still the
and-
case that even if you have money available for the capital cost of it, you're still going to have higher ongoing costs that I don't think would ultimately be. I mean, if you're now operating a dam and a fish passage, you have the operation of both. So that ongoing cost for however long is going to be
for sure.
higher.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you would be getting
I'm just wondering if people
covered in that
didn't
realm.
get enough information to really understand the 3 choices. That's all.
No, I get that, yeah.
Did anyone get that impression that people, I mean, that's another thing we really need to add to that list is the costs for each. And I wasn't really clear on why we didn't include that in the presentation. Is that?
It was,
They weren't
so
confirmed
I,
You get wedded to numbers. I think.
Yeah, right.
yeah, I mean, it was sort of a last minute decision and discussion with Dina that the numbers are estimates and there are a lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration. And it was more a worry that if numbers are put before people and that's the one piece of information that gets taken away, and then it's not an exact number. So it was more in caution of trying to not misrepresent something and then have to take it back.
I've
Is
said
there a
this
way
several-
where we can get better numbers so we can
Well, I
actually
think
can present that? Because I feel like people would need to, I mean, people didn't even know it was in the millions. They just saw a chart and with.
Well, those numbers were available in the
room.
room,
Yeah,
so
but
it
a lot of
wasn't
people didn't
not
see them, I
available
don't think.
anywhere. It was just taken out of
Yeah.
the presentation so that if yeah, if somebody only got that one little soundbite from the whole presentation, then that wasn't.
I personally think it's really important that people know those numbers. And I've talked to a lot of people that said, I need to know the numbers. I
But
need
it
to
may be
know.
a matter simply
Yeah.
of making public what's in the report.
Right.
In a way that
Yeah.
can be easily digested.
Can I ask you a
Right.
question though?
Yeah.
And Deb knows what I'm gonna say. I don't understand why exact numbers are important as much as relative costs.
That's fine too. I think people just want to understand, is it $10,000? Is it $4 million? Just a ballpark, I think is great. I'm not saying we
We
need,
didn't even have
I shouldn't
ballpark
use the word
numbers.
exact,
Correct.
but during the
We did,
presentation,
yeah.
we
We did.
didn't, and the first one, we didn't at all during the session in the cafeteria.
But
So,
Ellen,
I
if
just
Dina
felt like
said
it'd be
they were
helpful to
just
get-
Estimates, do you know, did she give you a reason for not having higher confidence in them?
Well, she said that Mike Burke had been asked to nail down some numbers a little bit more, have less variable in the final number. And so because that he was being tasked with that work while we were presenting it, I just didn't want to,
No, I
say, oh,
understand
it's
why
going
you
to be
didn't.
$6 million. And then the next time we meet in public, say, oh, actually, it's, not, I didn't want to be so off that then we would be eating our words. I just felt like it would
No,
be
you're
creating.
eliminating it
Yeah,
made perfect sense. It's just a matter of knowing when we might get the numbers and what was
right.
making Mike
Mhm.
concerned about how solid they were.
Well, look at Dover Foxcroft.
Yeah.
They thought it would be 2 million to restore their dam, and now they're looking at 8 million.
Right.
So, I mean.
Well, I think
that-
you can
that's
pretty much
huge.
always
It's a
assume
big
that
difference.
with
It's a big difference,
construction
and they
costs.
We
voted
need
to
to understand
restore it.
that.
And
And,
it's-
and how much is it going to cost per year per
Maintenance.
taxpayer?
Well,
Think
and
about it that
also
way. It's a
ongoing
completely
maintenance.
different,
Mhm.
Yeah.
ongoing maintenance as
But
well.
that's also in the charts. It's just not easily pulled out.
In the
The
charts
charts
that-
in the feasibility report. It
Oh
has
yeah,
the
that's
maintenance
very
costs.
old information now.
Mhm.
And we don't, and per each design, like that's new information. And I believe Interfluve is working on that. I think we need to talk to Interfluve. I'd be happy to reach out to Mike and just be
I mean,
like,
I think
what's going on with the
the
report?
basic
and
of it is
what's in
that the Interfluve numbers are low at this
Mhm.
point because they're not
They're
in,
from 2021.
right.
Right.
So
Or 20,
they would be higher
Very
than they
different.
are now.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Not
think-
only that, there's been a lot more analysis.
And I think it just boils down to, we need to take a look at the designs that we have, make sure that there is some sense of what the relative costs may be, and date those designs so we know they're the latest designs.
Yes.
And also be very careful on making sure that our wording is correct. If we're talking about restoring or repairing or whatever, because I think that's important as well. We've used several different kinds of words in different scenarios. And also if you're looking at B and C, I know the library has said to me, well, are you talking about a stepped wall, or are you talking about a 11-foot wall, or are you talking about no wall? So I think we need to be try to be a little more careful on what is included in the scenarios or what could be included. And our wording needs to be
Right.
cleaned
The
up.
Harbor
Okay,
Park
should I-
portion.
Are there any questions that I've missed? I'm trying to so is that?
This isn't easy to follow.
So,
Just wanna
well,
make sure I'm
I
getting-
guess we should make sure that our wording is correct in our scenarios, that they're dated, and that
Right.
we come up with good current designs to show people.
Yeah, and I think that was the point that is in my head is you got to say cost estimate still as of date. Because,
Yep.
I mean, think about this community, how people got all up in arms, especially if they were already opposed to the project, when the cost of the middle school construction bumped up because there was a delay of several months.
Mm.
And that's just the economy we live in.
Yeah.
You know, the costs, I mean, there's,
Right.
I honestly just
Right,
don't know
these
how
are,
much.
you're not married to the numbers.
You're not as, bound by material costs with these kind of things because we're,
Yeah.
but there's still some reconstructive that will
It
require.
matters more for the maintenance stuff.
Right.
Than,
Yeah.
because if
ongoing
we're paying
costs.
like 10% match
Yeah.
for the bigger project, it's not as much of a jump if there is a big increase. But if we're thinking about maintenance,
10% of 8 million versus 10%
a lot.
of 2 million is still
it's so
huge.
important to get it
Yeah.
right or try to.
For me, I think there's still a unknown by this group and the public as far as, I want to say the do nothing option. Because I feel like there's still, if, I'm just going to walk through a scenario where this group might recommend an option to the select board. If the select board put out to voters that to remove the Montgomery Dam and the Camden voter base were to reject that, what is the select board doing on the next year? Are they putting in a budget of $4 million to I mean, it'd be nice to know. I realize what Mike Burke wants, and he feels that there's a significant refurbishment costs, but is the town select board going to be putting that out? Are they, is there, I guess I don't understand the process. If the select board is recommending removal of the dam and that gets rejected, have you actually chosen option A? Like, is
Yeah.
a no vote option A, or is a no vote something else?
That's a good question.
Well, I think there was definitely confusion in the questions that we received. There was sort of a consistent question of why is the estimate for option A not lower? Or why are we not offering one at lower or taking a lower bid? Which I think needs to be clear that that estimate is not something that reflects a profit margin. Those are standard engineering estimates, not, I mean, I think there seems to be some confusion that we maybe put it out to bid and that was, we chose the highest bidder, or I'm not quite sure what the perception is, but those are cost estimates with no profit margin. So I think.
But I can't tell if the town is getting mandated from a federal level that you need to repair the dam. Or,
Right,
because
I mean,
right now we
the
haven't
question of what would
spent,
they actually commit
right now
to
we haven't
do?
spent really any money on the dam for all intents and purposes over
Right.
the last
8
20 years or,
Yeah.
and so.
That's actually not true. We got a report.
Yeah,
from-
there's been repairs.
From Mike, a 23-page report.
I realize that, but we have not spent millions and millions of dollars on dam
No,
repair.
thousands.
We've gone out there and Public Works has put some
Right.
plaster on things and they've
Right.
done, it's $10,000 here, $20,000 here. But I guess, is that what would continue, or I don't know that
I get the sense that
I think the
The whole
voters are
reason
going to
they're
need a
doing this
very
project-
clear,
Hmm.
I think the voters are going to need a very clear
Right.
understanding from the select board. And so it may not come from us, but I think they're
What
going
that
to,
commitment looks like.
what that commitment looks like for a yes vote, a no vote for these different options.
I agree.
I don't know. I mean, as a select board, our baseline is to go forward and refurbish the dam. If the town votes to remove the dam, that's one thing. If they don't, then our plan is to refurbish the dam at X number of dollars.
Well, maybe that is something that the town has to be tasked with then. If you are obligated to keep and maintain the dam, then they have to put together a package that says it's whatever it is, the 3 million, 2 million, whatever the estimate is, and how that becomes.
Why would that be different than what they proposed for option A? The numbers that,
It's not. It is
No,
option
but
A.
no, it
Option
is
A,
option
right?
A, but I think what Tyler's saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but how would that obligation essentially be fulfilled?
Yeah.
If the decision was to keep Montgomery Dam as it is, then does the town have
where
it?
did the money come from?
How do they meet this budget, and what is the plan over however many years, and what does that look like?
I think
To
that have to be
whomever
another
it's
question
burdening and-
in the next vote November. Do you allocate X, Y, Z? They'd have to get more specific. They'd have to figure
Right.
that out. I think, right? I
But
don't think
maybe
you can answer
that's-
that on
Unless you have a
in June.
bucket that says, okay, you here is what the option is. If you, let's say it's to take down the dam, I'm just, or maybe it's to restore the dam. And it's going to cost $2 million. If you vote down, let's say, restoring the dam, then those $2 million will be put in the budget, but will go towards perhaps something else. I don't know. maybe depends how we write
It's
that.
a
Yeah,
hard,
it could
it's a
be.
hard question to get into at all
That's-
without clear direction on
Yeah.
the high hazard dams.
Yeah.
And
So-
we may also not be the correct,
Mhm.
this is probably not the right forum to answer.
Yeah.
It may be
We should
we can
wait.
provide recommendations to select board, but I think they should address that with the voter base.
One question, okay? If option A is chosen by the citizens of Camden, does that mean that the whole river project goes away? Meaning that if you don't have any fish passage, what do you do?
I would
Because
say-
we didn't show any fish passage with option A.
No, but
No.
that fish passage is important for federal funds.
I know
for
that,
certain
but-
programs.
but-
No, but a larger question asked earlier tonight, I
Mhm.
thought I heard, was what are the possible funding sources?
Mhm.
Not just the federal government for fish passage, but others.
Right.
And so I would think that would be a place they would look first.
And I would say that this committee was not tasked with fish passage.
No,
This
well,
committee was tasked with health of the river, and part of that has been the ecological side, but I think other parts of it are things like storm resiliency
Yes.
and
Mhm.
watershed management in other ways.
So wouldn't we really be asking the voters to consider upgrades to the high hazard dams as a storm resiliency measure? And a decision on Montgomery Dam is not necessary or really a part of it?
Well,
It's
Two different
but
things.
that's-
It's two different.
that just
Maybe
deals
there need
with
to be
the
two
flood
questions.
resiliency.
Yeah, I think it's
That doesn't
separate.
Deal with the other things that the town listed out for us to think about.
also the town is not obligated to ask for voter input on what they do with the other dams.
I mean, I think this board should be providing the select board recommendations, including recommendations for storm
Oh,
resiliency of
totally.
these
Yeah, all the
structures.
way up. I think that is our job.
I think
Yes.
it's just as
Yeah.
important as the fish passage.
No, absolutely. But I'm saying they wouldn't necessarily have to ask anybody what they choose to do with that.
Well, they would for,
If
to
the
get the money for
taxpayers
it.
are paying for it,
Yeah,
then they
to
might.
get the money for it. Yes, they have to get the voters to,
Say, do you allocate X, Y,
Allocate
Z?
money.
Well, okay, no, I'm
Budget-wise.
talking about if there are high hazard funds that they can,
Oh, if there's funding.
right, yeah, sorry,
Right.
I didn't.
That's
I should
okay.
clarify that better.
That's a good point.
I think we're talking around a structural thing that I think about the vote that I don't think we all have a firm understanding of, and I think it might warrant some, either getting permission from Audra to talk to the town attorney or somebody else who's an authority on this, and that is what the vote might look like, because I think it might shape what our recommendation is. And what I specifically mean there is that, as I've heard, this is, here's what I heard. But the vote that can go before the voters has to be a binary thing, and it's an up or down thing.
Mhm.
I don't know if we could also have like a cascading set of questions. I've seen that way around some of this, but I think this might be a lawyer question. I don't mean, 'cause they ain't my kind of law, but there, somebody, or maybe it's even a matter of speaking with the register of, what do you call it? The voter lady.
no.
What's her
There
name?
was,
Somebody brought up
Rank choice, right.
well, yeah, but there
But
was,
that's specific to-
there is a signed document from the lawyer for the town to the lawyer that represented Save Dam Falls and signed by the town manager, I believe, that says it's going to be a yes or no, up or down vote on Montgomery Dam, period. Okay?
So that
No
eliminates
qualifying
ranked
stuff or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, so that's already been, that's been,
Okay.
approved by the attorney. Now,
Oh.
whether it's changed or not, yes, but that's,
That's good to
Can,
know.
let's keep moving on here as far as trying to capture any other questions that were raised by the public that we felt needed to be addressed.
I have one, and it wasn't lots and lots, but there were a number of them. And it had to do with what is the relationship between this project and the Olmsted, the dam itself and the Olmsted legacy. There seemed to be differing opinions and some confusion about, for example, one person commenting said that the Olmsted legacy, that the dam was part of the Olmsted plan. Things like that. And we have documents that
It's part
make
of
it
the
look different.
plan, but
It was taken into consideration, but it wasn't part of the plan. The dam was there when Mary Bach.
Yes, the dam was there.
The dam
right,
was there.
but they made some modifications.
They did,
They did.
for their own
So I think that's what
reasons.
people mean.
Well, but I think it's important to be clear that any changes in the dam outside of what the board of the library says don't necessarily violate the Olmsted legacy.
Yes.
That's all.
Do you feel it was clear to the public? Because I don't feel it's clear in the renderings that the decision on the Montgomery Dam is for the most part separate from what happens with the seawall.
Well, and that's a good question. What is the relationship of the seawall, the park? Who, if scenario 3 is voted for, which is changes the river and takes down the dam, it will significantly impact the park. And unless something is done to address the seawall and the retaining wall, that's that hill that's there, it will not be supported by the trustees. There's very clear wording in their latest statement today.
But I do think the renderings are confusing because
They are.
they'll do like what was shown in rendering, I forget all the, what was shown in one rendering could have been shown in the other rendering.
Well, and that's what I was trying to say in the presentation is that those things are not,
You kind of, they look nice and it's nice to see different options, but
Right.
right, it
Right.
confused,
Focus on
it
the wrong
confused
thing.
the matter.
Step wall, one was an 11-foot
Correct.
wall, one was a winding area, one was a.
Right, which
I think-
all are available regardless of,
what happens? Oh,
yeah. So I think it's maybe better to kind of consider them in isolation of one another, at least
from the grounding ramp over to the American Boathouse.
just
that
for the
section-
sake of,
That makes sense.
That section there
right,
is,
But there's also another project and another grant that is looking at that
Right.
area.
Yeah.
Only for design. I mean, not about implementation, but.
right, but I think it's, I think for a lot of people that look at renderings, it's very confusing because it's like, I can see someone saying, I like this one because I like what they've done over here.
Right.
And you're like, well, you can
Right.
do whatever you want over there.
Right,
That's not,
Right.
It's like you need a
Yeah.
flip chart for the
Right.
grounding ramp and the.
Yeah, and next time maybe we should just have the
Right.
same thing on each one, so people
Mhm.
I
don't
think it-
compare and
yeah,
I
get
think
I
it
agree.
would.
and explain
reduce
maybe a little bit
confusion.
more that it's just about the funding. It's not really.
Mhm.
We don't
Like you
have to
said, you
decide
kind
on
of
that.
need a flip chart for the
Yeah,
one
you could-
side, a flip chart.
Yeah,
for
it
the
could
other
look
side.
like this,
You know, like
this,
changing
that would be
faces,
great.
the kids do.
Yeah. And I think it would be helpful too, and if we do the presentation again, to zero in on just the dam, because it was so far back. I heard some feedback that people couldn't really see just the dam area, and they'd like to focus on that. Did you get any feedback on that too?
I
being able
didn't,
to
but
see-
but I can see that, yeah.
Yeah. Because I think, just along the lines of the Harbor Park being involved, it did maybe distract a little bit.
But it's
Potentially.
important to say that if
It needs to be part
scenario
of it.
3 is
Yeah.
chosen, which changes the river, that Harbor Park must be included in that.
Yeah.
Funding for Harbor Park, the seawall
Right.
must be included in that.
Another one that came up in a number of places was a desire to understand a lot more about resiliency, not just the definition of it, but for example, with the options. And I know Mike did a quick job of trying to say what the resiliency benefits were of each of the three, but there's a lot more to be said, particularly if you define resiliency in a broader way. To
Right, which
include
are,
water quality, fish, economic development, all of that.
Right. yeah, our own definition says resiliency refers to the system's ability to withstand or quickly rebound to changes as it relates to a variety of pressures, e.g. economics, aesthetics, environmental, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I don't think we answered that very well in the presentation and maybe muddied that a little bit more. So making
Is
sure
that from
we
our
know
website?
It's
Yes,
from
and
the
that's,
website, but it's not anything we voted on, and there are a number of other definitions.
but it is
one
from,
NOAA.
it is from a meeting that we had where we discussed our interpretation of resiliency. And so that was sort of the defining,
That was their take.
right,
what
on
a number
what
of
we
us-
sort of determined. So I think for our own ability to communicate uniformly what we're working on, it's best to know that that's sort of the definition we're working from.
I would suggest that we really put an adjective in front of resiliency, and one of them be flood resiliency, because that's a separate whole thing. That's probably the biggest concern for anybody who brings up resiliency. I mean, yes, a better
It's
ecological.
interesting, you would put it as a qualifier rather than a kind of resiliency. In other words, resiliency includes flood protection.
Well, yeah, but I mean, really, that I think is going to be the big one, because when you talk about the East, West, and Seabright dams, that's really flood resiliency that you're talking about right there.
Well, but the other dams are too, in terms of increasing a possible floodplain.
Right, yeah.
It's not
Okay,
just
yeah,
the
okay,
high
okay,
hazard
but
dams.
for all the dams, but I mean, I think that can be separated from the other, I'll call ecological factors or whatever.
But there are others, there's
River health
educational,
and
they're
everything.
social, they're
Yeah,
recreational.
right.
There are a
No, I'm
number
not
of
saying not to talk about those, but I
No,
really
I'm
think
just saying
flood
to define
resiliency.
resiliency specifically or concretely in terms of those specific benefits.
Right.
Because it's a partial answer to the question of what are you getting in exchange
Mhm.
for changing the river?
Right.
You get these things.
But you're saying to spell it out.
I'm sorry?
You're saying to kind of spell it out more so people understand what we're talking
Yeah,
about. So I kind of,
Exactly.
I kind of
Yeah,
agree.
because the
People are
word
being lost.
resiliency means a lot,
words.
something different to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
All right, and I
So-
think, our working definition also says that we're referring to different aspects of that
Exactly.
term. And, you know, if you're talking about, I mean, I agree that flood resiliency is
Mm-hmm.
probably the most important to a lot of people.
Right.
But I also sort of interpret it as, you know, if you're talking about financial resiliency, how can you have this watershed be something that doesn't require ongoing financial input to, you know, I think there's different ways that you can look at what resiliency means in terms of those different
Mhm.
qualifiers.
Okay.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
All right, yeah.
So Deb, do you want to go through these and try to identify ones that we feel are more important to address?
Yeah, because then the ones that we think are most important, we'll start with those. We'll have to, at some point, maybe not tonight, given the time, we'll need to figure out how we want to do it, because it may not be another big event or presentation. It might be a series of small events with people who are particularly interested in more detail and clarity about one or two of these that are related. So it's a matter of, and it's people deciding, my favorite, color dots. And
Are we done? Has everybody said what
I
they
don't-
felt?
I don't know.
I don't know, the people have, I have a number of things from people, but I'm not sure they don't overlap with what's already up there. One thing I know that has come up a number of times, a question about what do we know about the damage, the impact of changing the Montgomery Dam on the buildings that are currently sitting in the river.
Right.
And who is responsible? Because there'll be, when we've heard this said, there are going to be freeze-thaw cycle differences from when there's water there. And you can compare it to water damage and ice damage, but it's, what do we know about the actual impact of changing that dam in the most radical, we'll say option 3 or C. What impact is that likely to have on the structural integrity of those buildings? And who would be responsible for paying any remedial efforts that would have to be made?
It's my understanding that that's part of this whole process. And they're
Well,
taking it
it
very
is.
seriously. They're talking to the owners and making sure they understand like this, the engineers are taking it under consideration. But I think that the question that keeps coming up is, or that I've heard is, can you guarantee that my building will be safe? And the engineers, of course, are saying yes, but how do we know that's true?
And what I heard was that they've not been allowed to inspect the buildings thoroughly enough to come
Well, we
up
couldn't
with-
guarantee they're safe either way, could we? I
No.
mean, that's,
No,
we can't, it's a
no,
river.
That's
No, it
it.
would be
So
an engineering guess,
Right.
it's a
Right.
sticky,
but
I
they
think
don't
we
have
need to
the
address that
inform-
more though and have more information on it.
And they can only do that with the cooperation of the landowners. I'm just saying, it's a
That's true.
question that people in our audiences have come up with because
Yeah.
they care.
right?
I'd like more information. Yeah. I feel like that information is kind of being kept from us, and maybe that's just because the town wants
When I asked,
to
more
like, they
than
don't want it
once-
to be public yet, and there's, private building owners
Or I suppose they don't
wanting
have
it to
that
be.
information.
I think it would be a good question for Mike Burke, because I think it would be, as he was compiling cost estimates, does the current cost estimates capture any rework of foundations?
Right, which I thought
And
that.
the answer is either yes or no, and then
Right.
I think he can also, I think even without inspection, you could probably develop a worst-case scenario which would be that you'd have to recreate footers for all these buildings.
Right, it's possible, but I think Gartley and Dorsey was
Gartley has-
also involved.
Correct.
Yes,
In that
they've done a
inspection.
survey on,
Right, but again, what I was told was that they weren't allowed to look at certain areas of at least one of the buildings
Yes.
that would have been really important to coming up with.
Yeah, it's difficult to
Yeah,
define a plan to help when you can't
when you can't.
assess it in the
look.
first place. I think I'm confused a little bit about the freeze thaw concept. If you were to go with option C and you have a river going now to a different area, essentially, some of those buildings that have footings in water would not be in water
Right.
anymore.
Right,
So you might be in a situation where you're having to alter what's under there as sort of a jumping off point. But if that were the case, I wouldn't see a long-term freeze thaw issue if they're not any longer in the path of water. But maybe
but it's
I'm
not
not.
water, but it's a substance. And as Tyler said, they probably, at a minimum, they'd have to do something about anchoring them differently.
Well, yeah, I agree, but I'm just saying in terms of a long-term impact, I'm
I
a
don't
little
know, I
bit
don't know whether it's
confused.
easier to be underwater long-term or subject to a lot of cold, hot, cold, hot.
When a
cold,
lot
hot.
of
Depends on the
those
material.
footers are on ledge, so I guess maybe I don't fully understand the.
Well, that's why there's the question.
That's the
What's the
question.
impact?
what's the
likely to be?
impact?
I'm not going to try to guess.
Right, I guess I'm just saying, for our own inn, that all of our buildings are on pilings, on sonotubes. They're exposed, but they're not having water, so we don't have some sort of freeze thaw issue that we're working with because we're not over. Anyway, let me just move on, but
I'm confused about it too.
Yeah.
We need more information about that, and it just
Yeah.
seems like we
So
haven't
is
been
that up there?
privy to it.
Any other questions?
there was one that I thought was interesting that asked, why do we hold sacred the impoundments above the east and west and Seabright Dam and not the one above Montgomery? And my personal interpretation of that is based on recreational use. But I thought it was,
Homes, properties.
well, right, yeah, homes along the water, but,
Because that's where the issues have been, I think,
right,
every year because of precipitation, drying precipitation, and people who live along the lake are vocal about their desires. And the people along the river, I think, have been pretty happy with what Mother Nature has delivered. As far as I know, in talking with them, they haven't had any issues. So I think that's why there's no spotlight on the lake. But certainly with the dam removal issue, there's a real question, which we have asked since early on. What are the implications for the people who live along the river?
right.
What happens to their property lines? What happens to their recreational use? A lot of different questions. Who owns that underwater section?
I think
But I
there's,
think that's why. I think it's because people care about the lake in a way that
Well, right,
I
yeah,
believe there's also some legal aspect to it.
Yes.
Because at one point, those dam structures that were located at the end of the Seabright impoundment and then the east-west dam impoundment, those structures were utilized for power for mills. And I think as they would draw stuff down, as people started utilizing that for recreational use,
Mhm.
they felt that they were now at the whim of whoever owned the mill.
Mhm.
And so I know that there was certain water level requirements legally set, and I don't know
Yeah.
what those documents look like or who it's through, but I believe both of those impoundments have legal definitions as far as what the water level needs to be maintained at.
Right.
I think
Yes,
the
they
one
will.
behind East-West is an agreement between Camden and Lincolnville for the level of the water there, for the people who own properties there. And Seabright, I believe, was the people who own properties along there petitioned the state, and I'm not sure you're the legal expert here, but petitioned petitioned the state for a ruling, and I think it's something that's been done elsewhere, for this has to be kept at a certain level, period.
So the answer to the question is legal reasons.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
there are legal reasons for
Legally
both of
required.
those particular impoundments. I don't think the same legal item, I don't believe it exists for the Montgomery Dam.
Dam, I believe that what I heard is I think there was a effort to do that. And I think the state basically said the water level there isn't deep enough to basically make that kind of a ruling.
It had to do with the
Yeah.
impoundment area of the dam.
Right.
It has to be 15-foot acres,
Okay.
and
Okay.
Montgomery
Yeah.
is not.
Right.
that big.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Okay, other questions? Because I think,
Deb,
right, yes.
I'm not going to go through this and everything like that, but I took you at heart and your instructions and everything like that, wrote up a whole bunch of questions. I'm not going to go through them. But I'd like to give you a copy after the meeting, and then you can determine whether you want me to send it around by email to everybody, okay?
Okay.
Do you think, are there some really important ones on there that you want to capture up here?
I'll tell you, one that has raised an issue, I think, is, I'll call it the seagull issue, okay? And one thing I would like to know is, and this is one I would like to know, I don't think it was voiced on any of those, okay? Will the town, how do I want to phrase it? Let me just read what I wrote here. Excuse me, if I should have had this right in front of me, okay? But basically, will commercial fishermen be allowed to harvest alewives in Camden Harbor from the public landing and Harbor Park, just like Elver fishermen have been able to do the last couple of years? And I think there's going to be a big one, because if you do have a commercial operation there, you're going to wind up with a lot of dead fish and a lot of seagulls. I mean, and I can pass around later a letter that, I'm going to say the Dan Falls Committee received from people who used to live here in Camden, are now involved with the Damariscotta fish ladder. And they just don't think Camden Harbor is the right place for a fish ladder because of what they've seen in Damariscotta. And from there, and the one comment the person said is that one of their neighbors has to take fish out of their gutters because of dead fish out of their gutters, because the seagulls are dropping the dead fish there. So that's something that I think we have to be conscious of, is that decisions we make are going to have, could have, I shouldn't say going to.
Right, but
Could have.
But is your question around what the town would propose? In other words, how does the select board, how would it view
Right.
the possibility of
Yeah.
commercial fishing
Right.
in the harbor?
Well, we allow it now, I mean, as far as the Elvers go, right?
Right, but would they extend that to other species
They do. There's commercial seine net fishing for pogies that happens in the head of the harbor.
in the head of the
Yeah.
harbor?
Yes.
Yep. I mean,
Yeah.
acres and acres of
Right.
small fish pulled
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
There's not a whole
Mackerel.
lot more dead fish. There's not a commercial mackerel fishery really, thankfully, because it's a depleted stock. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, a few get caught up in that.
Some people
Say
say
net.
that, it seems.
It's near commercial when you catch 10 on a line. But nonetheless, there's a lot of seine boat fishing happening inshore in many harbors.
Yeah, right.
Currently.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Okay.
so
Are they required to allow all of them?
it's not really, it's kind of like, it's the ocean and they have a quota.
Yeah.
And so they're filling their quota.
Outside the harbor?
So it's
or
DMR.
Oh, no, they
It-
say it in the
it-
harbor.
in
Oh,
wherever they can.
Wherever they
wrap their head
can.
around the fish.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the town has no ability to control that.
Well, I mean, if you do it as a weir, like in the town of Warren, then, it's very much a town operation.
Right.
And I will just say that the seagull issue is not a big deal in Warren. I mean, like there's a weir there, they're hauling out tons and tons on every tide. It's just not a lot of guano and birds.
Yeah.
There are other choke points where this happens and nobody can really guarantee. But if we're really concerned about what one group of animals is going to be behaving like, then really it's an argument for the greatest fish passage that we can possibly offer, so the most predators can be in there to chase them out. And like I've heard that the pogies in Rockport cause a mess on people's boats, and then my answer is do something great for striped bass and other predators. They will chase them out of there. And they do their best, but I mean, those fish are just eating pollution that we create in our harbors, doing their jobs, filtering it out. So there's all sorts of stuff to clean up there.
Okay.
Did you have another really important one? Randy?
Can I just add on to that one real quick?
I'm sorry.
I think you're also asking the broader question, maybe I'm going to bring this, the broader question of what are the impacts of restoring the river.
Right.
And scenario B, which would be fish passage per the alewives. Like during the alewife run, what would that look like? Seagulls, crowds,
Right. Yep.
So if
whatever.
you vote
you
for
wanna-
full
just
dam
think
removal-
about the implications of it. And I don't think we really talked about that in our presentations. Maybe people are curious about.
Well, certainly there would be
but-
regulatory bodies determining the level of fishery that you could even have. I mean, I don't think that we can personally determine that, but I don't know
Just
how.
like what it would look like. I think with people thinking like, okay, what does it look like at the harbor when the alewives are running?
I think it's also good to understand, we had a couple of different scenarios, because my guess is scenario B
B would be the
with a more concentrated fish running through some choke points might induce a lot more
seagull.
predator activity than a natural river.
Yeah, full dam
Totally.
removal, like a speedy entrance into the watershed would be a way to really. cut
I just think
down
I
on-
think something that people, we should consider and that we're going to get questions about.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
All right, can we move on to the,
Sure.
all right, everybody gets at least one of these. And then the green dot shows where you think it's priority.
And are we saying priority for the public to know or priority to get answered so that we can make a decision?
No, because that's the second question, is what do we need to know?
So green only?
Okay.
No.
Oh, this is
green
just for the
no,
public.
Start with
Red's
green.
What's
Start with
pink?
green for your top, well, actually, no, because we're not gonna take time walking
Have
around town. So green is top priority. Yellow is next priority, and red is maybe if we have time. In other words, it's the lowest priority.
And we only get one of each.
And sorry, could you clarify, this is just for the public or this is for our recommendations?
No, this is just, what does the public need to know?
Oh, okay.
What do we need to tell them to help increase the understanding they already have?
So each one of us does one green, one red, and one
Yeah,
yellow?
for now, it's most important to get the green and the yellow. So, to avoid too much walking time, do one green. You want 2 priorities a person?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
There's no math answer to this. It just makes you're kicking down the road.
2 green, 1 yellow?
What? No, just do 2 greens, all right?
Okay,
I don't want to make this any more
too
complicated.
late. I'm just kidding.
Is that mine? No.
Yeah, I do too.
There are 3 sheets up there, just so you know.
I know, but someone just feels real heavy on important
It was the
information.
first one.
Yeah.
Catch alewives with the net up.
Oh, that sounds
Up in
fun.
Quantico.
Nice.
I'm sorry, what?
My kids like catching the alewives up in Quantico with the net.
Sounds pretty
Scoop
cool.
them out,
Yeah.
Come along the shore.
Yep, that's a
I looked at. I was
wonderful
like,
thing.
Oh, I was like, you can look at smoking them, and then I looked at it and I was like, it's like a week-long process, and I was like, oh, never mind.
Maybe
You
when
gotta
you have a
keep
little
it
more time.
smoldering.
Never mind.
Oh, when they're really running, you could probably just reach down and grab one.
I have a question, whose green dot is this and which
Mine.
one does it go with?
If they're the same, I
They're
think.
basically the
I
same.
think they're similar, so I put it in the middle.
Come on.
Just trying to complicate things.
Contrary. What can I say?
Nobody putting yellow?
No, just
I
green.
thought
for
we were
now.
told to,
With 2 apiece, we'll go down with all of them.
I think these two are very similar, like in the same bucket.
Okay.
Do you think? Costs.
I think understanding the grants will cough
Right.
up costs for each, yes.
So if anyone who did the bottom one, those 3 green dots, if you want to replace them on something else, or go ahead.
oh, yeah.
I guess just cost might be
The super
costs, yeah, the super term, right?
This goes for both of them, right?
And it kind of includes this what we're saying. The whole,
Yeah, right.
whole costs.
Yeah, I'm seeing the range, yeah. Put it over here because that is the important part of that.
Well, we're
Okay.
saying these are.
Yeah,
these are
I know.
The same, oh, okay. We're
Okay,
just
no, I'm
doubly
still gonna do
excited
that,
about it.
yeah. I think the financial,
Does anyone have-
stuff is the big,
A compelling yellow dot they want to put up there.
Compelling yellow.
Because I think it's important that we move on to what we need to know.
I was gonna put it on what would the impacts of the restoration of the river be when fish are running? I hadn't actually really, I mean, I had thought of that, but not as, I don't know, I just hadn't,
Well, we're not going to throw any of these away. This is about
Yeah.
what we want to work on right
well, I
now.
just think that one is, and again, it's a visual for people. Maybe that's important.
It's a
too.
tricky one because I think it's, some of that's out of our hands.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
it's, say it's a free running river, well, then it's a decision with the town, how that's managed. And so I think there's so many potential areas where it could branch in 2 different
Okay.
directions that it becomes kind of a hard one to nail down, but that's my personal
It would be
opinion.
a guess, and by looking at other places which are not exactly the same, it would be hard to draw conclusions.
But it perhaps may provide bounds, and you may understand some of the
Totally.
issues or concerns.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like you said, Danvers-Scotta Mills is one example where, some other locations might not encounter.
Well, and
the
it may
same thing.
require a timeline. I mean, I can't imagine that if it were fully restored, the alewives are at 300,000 right out of the gate. I mean, it might be, I guess you probably have more expertise in that, but how long it would take to
Gee,
get to sort of peak level.
It depends on how the town wants to approach it. If you're
Right.
just recruiting strays that are already in the estuary, then it's incremental and
Right.
it's a ways off. And that's how St. George did it because they already had a big river. And when they just removed Sennebec Dam, it was opening up more of the watershed. So it just, increased the number exponentially. But I've heard talk of jump starting a run. That's what Nate
Right,
Gray
that's, yeah,
is.
that would be a
That's what the
question
fish
then.
experts are about, that if you really want it for town revenue and you want to show the taxpayers a return quickly, then we stock alewives from other estuaries where it's been successful that are just like yours, and bam.
Right, so that's more of a matter of determining what the goal of the town would be in the first place in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, Tyler, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
We've got 35 minutes left,
sure.
and both of the questions under B, I think, are equally important.
Okay.
And so if we can spend half the time on the first one, the factors we think are important in making our recommendation. And the second one is, what information or clarification would you like to have before making that recommendation? And some of those are already up there because it was cross-category. But if we could spend an equal amount of time on each of those, that would be really helpful.
I think that's great. So what factors do you believe are important in making our recommendation to the select board?
I have two things that one is, can the town apply for funding before the town vote to clarify what might be covered by a grant? Was one. And are the designs for Montgomery Dam set in stone, and can they be modified once a recommendation is made?
What do you mean? After
In other words,
we
if we
make
have
a
75% of the drawings done,
yeah.
what changes can be made? In other words, can we change to a step wall? Can we change the grounding ramp? Can changes be made to a design once we've applied for funding? Or does it have to be
Oh, I see what you're saying.
pretty much set
After
in
we
stone?
apply.
Susan, I'm sorry, will you repeat?
Yeah.
So my first one was.
I think the answer is yes to that usually. Yeah. If the town
Can the
wants.
town apply for funding before there is a town vote? To clarify what might be covered in a grant. And, looking at the possibility that some of the funding may change in the next year or two. I've heard this from several different places. Can we go ahead and apply for funding, maybe for high hazards or even for Montgomery and say, okay, we're 75% of the way there. Let's apply for funding. And then we have an idea perhaps of what we might get.
This came up with the other dams we were talking about removing. And we decided that, yes, we can apply. And we put the caveat in that application that if the vote goes to no, we'll change, we'll adapt.
Right, because if we're given funding, we can always say, no, we don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. It is possible. I think it's just, the thing that we're worried about is the optics of that. Like it makes us look like that's what, we want, or that's, it might not come across the way that the town wants it to. There's a danger there, but it is possible. That's what we learned, I think, at least last time. But when it comes to Montgomery, maybe we should think about it.
A take on a little bit of what we put up there and everything like that, but I think we need a cost benefit analysis for keeping Montgomery Dam versus removing the dam and creating permanent fish passage. And we've talked about.
Just financial.
Beg pardon?
That phrase, cost-benefit analysis, makes me crazy.
It's a good question.
Mutual.
Yeah.
And so when you say, in your head, when you ask that question, are you talking the costs just financial or all costs? And benefits just financial, meaning less cost, or all? So what would an analysis?
I think the only way you're going to be able to measure stuff, the other is basically financial. Okay, because,
Financial. Okay.
yeah, okay, yeah.
This is from one of the renderings that you did, Tyler. It's a question that two of us had wondered about. Can there be a pond, a reflecting pool, without the dam? Is that an option that's worth looking at? Is it even, I have no idea. I don't know. You probably didn't cost it out, did you, Tyler? Because it would answer the concerns about water coming over the rocks. You'd have the pond and you'd have the river. But is it even feasible? Is there any point in wondering about it?
Well, I think it also, for me, that brings up the question of what aspects of those things are being valued. Is it an acceptable choice to say it's no longer a dam, but there is still an even flow waterfall out of this thing? Is that's acceptable, or is that not? And if it's not, then what would be the pursuit of that? And also, who is the reflecting pond for? Because it doesn't necessarily seem like, in my opinion, a universal across the board desire, but that's
No, but it's basically a technical question.
right.
That's all.
I think,
Because
Yeah.
some of the questions people have asked that
Yeah.
have made me curious are, and they're not all in agreement, as you said, about whether it's the flow of the water, the cascade, or whether it's water over rocks. People differ. It's just a curiosity. Is it even feasible technically? Or is
Right, well, I guess what I'm saying is it worth putting energy into if the desire to keep the dam is for historical purposes, then a replacement of that emulates it doesn't meet that
no, I agree.
request.
think
So
it
is it
confuses.
worthy of the time that we have is kind of my question.
I think some people just really like the look of it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And could we could either
So
also
it'd be a
create
reflecting
a
pond perhaps with a waterfall.
a whole side gig.
Yeah.
Because, I think if you had a pond, it would slow down the flow and people might not.
Well, the water's not
Want
coming
that.
from the river in the rendering that Tyler did.
Right, that's what I'm
Right.
saying. So if it was a side thing, it would be.
Well, and when you consider the historical, I mean, the river was off to the side, so the pond
Yeah.
currently really is off to the side of where the natural
Yeah.
flow of the river is.
But Ellen's question objection is, in my head, is well-founded, is if the people who want to hold on to the dam are concerned because it's historical, then making a look-alike is not the same thing as keeping the original dam.
Right.
And if people are more interested in the aesthetic of water cascading, then maybe it's a legitimate question.
Unless you keep part of the old dam
Right.
as part of the old dam and the river, as I said, is off to the side. I don't know.
I still
I
think
know.
that's an option of keeping some of the dam.
I mean, having asked the question, I
If
think
we-
it just confuses the main issues, but that's.
Yeah, and maybe
Right.
maybe the question is what are the options there? Yeah, we didn't really
I don't
get
want
to
to go
dive
back
into
to the
that.
design table to try to come up with
Yeah,
more new, it's respecting what Tyler did. And visually, it was an interesting option.
I agree. I think we still
Yeah, I
have
agree.
questions there and we need to think about all of them before we make our recommendation.
So is cost is up there, right? Well, cost benefit.
Financial cost.
Yeah. Um,
Be monetary or financial?
The same thing that's up there.
Monetary cost.
Yeah, for us.
Yeah.
Is what are the
Remunerative.
implications for town funding for
In other
any
words-
part of this?
Yes.
It's another part of asking what percentage of the cost of any part of this, including the upstream parts, would fall on the taxpayers.
I think it's important for us to understand, whether it's the town lawyer or discussion with, like, what type of constraints or contingencies you can put on a recommendation. Because I think, really simple example would be, there's a number of fairly large private dams that if those private dam owners aren't interested in removing their dam, I might not make a recommendation to remove the Montgomery Dam because
Right.
they're going to go 500 feet and run into a
Right.
15-foot rise.
Oh, I forgot.
But there is some interest on the part of the two, certainly the two near town private dams, the Knox Mill Dam and the Knowlton Street Dam.
So I guess it would be good for us to understand how, like, I would see a recommendation with us. If your recommendation was to remove the dam, I think that would be, I would say that recommendation would be contingent upon
Right.
Right.
the private owners
So
of
that's what
these
you're
committing
looking for.
to.
You're looking for that kind of an exception
Yeah.
or contingency.
A
Yeah.
springing
Well, and do we have to
recommendation.
have a contingency? In other words, for funding, do we have to have?
No, but for the vote, I think he's asking, can we?
I guess
recommend?
I even think
Are we allowed to
I
have
think our recommendation would be based on it.
Yeah.
Because I think if those private dam owners came into our meeting and told us they're not interested in removing their dam structures, I'd have
Exactly.
quite a discussion with Seth to figure out how effective, 1,000 feet of stream is for these particular species
Yeah,
in
bring it-
their
So
that in writing because
question then
we're
is-
getting
is
to the big grapevine.
I think it's good for us to understand, like,
legally, can we add a contingency?
yeah, or
Hmm.
what that looks like.
We're a little bit more freewheeling and
Yeah.
what we can recommend. I mean, the select board is going to have their hands tied in terms of, at least my read is up or down vote on a single concept, but
I think we're probably free
yeah,
to
we
do
can
it.
just make it, yeah,
Right.
we can make it complicated for
But
them if we want.
But I think it's important for us to do that because I think
so.
I think it adds weight to our decision, and your decision is based upon certain things falling in place.
Yeah. I mean-
And I think funding is one of those.
But is funding contingent on those dams coming out upriver? I don't know. Do we know?
That's what we have to find out.
Yeah.
But I think your recommendation may be based on funding.
A certain
Absolutely.
type of funding is, such as from, like the Atlantic Salmon Federation. They're not going to do something that is not about habitat restoration and fish
Yeah.
passage.
Right.
So you're looking at other funding options, such
Right.
as federal funding options that, as discussed, are changing. Those still there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So there's grants from many avenues.
Nonprofits,
NGOs.
NGO, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
The
old
thing is
school.
that if ownership of the Knox and the Knowlton dams changes, which is a huge possibility.
Yeah.
Who knows what the next owners would do? Maybe they'd come in and say, yeah, take this thing out. And and then if the Montgomery Dam is or isn't taken out, then that changes that picture. So maybe we need to do it without. That was a big question for me, which I totally forgot. I didn't write it on my thing. That to get somehow some clarity from those owners about whether or not they would take their dams down.
Well, and we
Because I
know
feel
they're
like we need
interested.
that.
We know they're in conversation.
Yeah,
That's all
Bina
we
has
know.
said that they're very willing, but we don't know for sure.
Okay.
It's
Well,
not, I
that's what
haven't
we-
Yeah,
seen
it's
it
not
in
in
writing, you
writing,
know?
yeah.
So
We need it writing. So.
we need writing.
Because we did hear from the owner of the Powder Mill Dam
Yes.
that he doesn't want the rocks moved or anything. He wants it just the way it is.
He
So-
actually, he doesn't own the dam. He owns
The property.
property.
property
Right,
on one
okay,
side of the
fine.
dam and maybe a smidge on
Right,
one side.
yeah, right. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. But anyways. So,
So do we need to add here some of the questions I wrote down during the first part of the conversation? One from you, Rick, to find out what, well, shorthand doesn't help. Ask Mike what Knowlton would look like.
Yeah, what I mean is the Knowlton, do they call it the Knowlton impoundment?
Do.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
What that would look
From there to, and I guess I misstated before, it wouldn't go to Seabright, it would basically go up to just short of, I guess,
like. The middle
Henry
school
Park.
or the.
oh,
yeah, what's the road that doesn't have a bridge in it?
Ross.
Ross.
Ross, thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, like shy of that.
My understanding is that, maybe we need to get this clear, but my understanding is the impoundment doesn't go all the way up there.
Okay,
There's that whole wetland behind the middle school. And the topography is such that that wouldn't really change. The topography is more, there's sort of a dip that keeps the wetland there.
Hmm.
So the impoundment really goes somewhere maybe where the water treatment plant is.
That's what I thought.
So like just
Yeah.
above the middle school or just below?
No, just below.
Just so close to where you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Very close.
got
But
it.
it's a little different. I mean, that's what
I
I'm
mean, it is
clarifying.
downstream.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
that's a chunk different.
Both of them, that we
But-
need to know what both of those impoundments.
From someone who's
not
spent a
to
fair
know
amount of time chomping down in the riverbed,
what they would
the-
look like.
the sediment that Mike Burke talks about in the Knowlton Street impoundment is present definitely right behind the middle school. So I don't know if that's all sediment that is part of the impoundment or not, but I mean, it is sediment laden up there.
Yeah.
Like
if
from the
there's-
fast little riffle that comes from Rawson down to basically right below the car wash. It's
Right.
freestone, it's rocks. And you get to the car wash point and the middle school and it's sand and mud and you better watch where you go because it's got sinkholes.
And Mike was advocating for some amount of dredging, I believe, in there, or not advocating, whatever the right
The
verb
impoundment?
is.
Yeah, it would have to be.
Yeah,
It
you would have
be.
to do that. And
It's
his
big
plans
rainwood.
had where, there would be dredging and intentional planting of native species and,
Right.
a holistic approach to making it.
Maybe like a boardwalk, river walk.
maybe.
Just throwing it out,
Maybe.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and I think I took notes from when we walked along in that area with him, but he had numbers for how far in he thought it would go and what.
50% less.
That might have been.
The
I
footprint
can't
of the
Remember that?
water
Was it
itself,
50%?
that was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was actually like more like,
More?
yeah.
Oh.
But not, I mean, but like 60-40, I think was about the
Okay.
proportion.
Maybe that's where I just made up.
50's in the middle.
Anyway.
I have another one.
Can we also capture what information or clarification you'd like to have before making a recommendation? That's the second question.
Yeah.
So keep going, sorry.
Say that again?
What information or clarification would you like to have before making that recommendation?
Other than these questions.
Other
Yeah,
than,
all these.
yeah.
I have another one. Yeah. It's, so it's actually, I already asked it, but it's about what are the impacts on properties and natural areas of like the big flood events and how much will it cost the town?
Is that different or the same as the liability question?
I think the liability question is part A of that. Well, a bullet point within that, because that it would be helpful not only know the cost, but how much, is the town liable?
But that was
For the
tied to
costs.
whether we do something with the dams or not. The first time that
Sorry?
question came up there was if we remove the dams and there's property damage, is the town liable? Or if we maintain the dams but say they cause flooding.
Either
are we
way.
liable?
Yeah, I thought I read that as either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, either way. Yeah. For me, it's more about at this stage, are the dams contributing to possible catastrophic flooding that will cost the town in damages, cost it in, financially, but also like, are we going to be able to access a road or, there's other impacts that can happen with massive floods. So like, what are those impacts?
Yeah.
And what could those impacts be? I mean, it's a really hard thing to determine, I think, but I
But
think
another way-
engineers can figure that out.
I don't even know what it is. It's a drop down from that. Is, does the town's liability change depending on what is done with the dams?
Yeah, that was sort of what I was getting at with it.
Like maintenance of a natural condition as opposed to maintenance of
Artificial.
not so
Yeah.
natural
Not so
condition.
natural.
Yeah.
I would imagine it would
Not so
change
natural.
because, yeah.
Hmm.
I would think that the dam would create more liability for the town.
Right.
Well,
Well,
is
that
there a
was-
way to assess that risk?
Yeah, there's
That's
people
what I,
that
that's
do
the
that.
question.
Well,
That-
no, but I
Right,
mean,
yeah.
That's the
wonder,
question
I mean,
I'm asking.
Feinschmidt
Yeah.
obviously gave us, and I
What's
mean,
the risk?
is there a way to assess it? I mean, is there a chance that we could end up like Asheville?
Well,
That's
even
exactly
if the dams
it.
even if the dams are in good repair, they can still breach,
Oh, I know.
yeah.
given the
Yeah.
volume of
Yeah.
water.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't know how you would answer that question.
Well,
About trying to
you can look at the
estimate.
FEMA flood maps and determine what could happen if there's like extra flooding in certain areas and how that impact the lands and the properties and the costs.
But
That's
it's still an
definitely
extrapolation,
doable.
So if you're trying to get a specific answer, you can't come up with it.
What do you mean? I mean, you can get a good understanding of what the risks are. I believe that's what Mike has been working on. I don't
But
know.
we have the
But-
flood maps that show us that. And the
Right,
FEMA maps.
Right,
and-
but we need the costs and we need more specifics about the impacts.
But I think I would
The-
leave it at a really high level question, which is you have a current condition that has certain risks. And then if you're changing that current condition to something different, have you increased the risk, decreased the risk, or is it staying the same?
Right.
That's a good way of framing
That's
it.
three
Yeah.
different ways of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Right.
lot of questions within that.
Yeah.
For sure. And like I said before, the current feasibility study that was done in 2021 doesn't address climate change.
No, right.
So we need to, I think that's a really important point that people are starting to really go, oh, wow, flooding's
You said Mike
happening.
was working on that?
I thought that's what was part of the report he's working on right now, but I haven't gotten a lot of clarity on what's going on with
Offered
that.
to reach out to.
I'll reach out to him and figure this out. And Bina probably knows more too. It would be great to have like a bullet point or like the outline of the report to know what's in it because it keeps coming up, these questions, and we need to know
Do we feel that
answers.
we need to, early on, we had discussion about properties that currently abut these impoundments and whether they were gaining land,
Right.
whether their property values were changing
Oh, yeah.
positive or negative.
That's been a
Or-
That's
question for a
one of the
long
things
time.
I've been
Yeah.
speculating about. But I mean, based on Elfie's representation about the area above the middle school, I guess I just have never been in a canoe and gone up around the bend, as it were. But you're saying that it's already narrowing in there. You were
No,
assessed as
it's
well.
wide.
No,
It's a big
above
wetland.
there. But there's a wetlands area and then the course of the river itself is,
But that's up, but the impoundment has a number of
right.
landowners. And that question has been on the books for a long, long time.
It seems like something that could be quickly addressed by Carrie or something.
And that was.
And I guess that I think at a high level, I think, do you feel we as a group need to have that to make a recommendation or not?
You mean the assessor?
Yeah.
That Carrie?
To find out that the impact on properties if the impoundment is drained.
Right. I mean, if we're going from a 100-foot width river to a 40-foot width river, which is kind of the proportion I was understanding, somebody gets free land out of that, right?
Well, they also lose riverfront.
Right.
So it's a.
The water-
Well, it just
plus
moves down, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
they still have river frontage
minus.
just
No, but I
further
don't know, is
away.
that their land?
Well,
That has been that's been a
It's been
question.
on
Yeah, we've been wondering
table
that
for a
forever.
long time.
We've
I
got,
would assume
And
it's still their land.
Because it would
I would
have
assume
an
they had more
impact
land.
Some
on a
properties
stakeholder.
own to the center of the river
Mhm.
in certain locations, and some properties own to the edge of
Edge
the
of the
water.
river, right, and we
Well,
don't
in
know.
that situation though, if the edge of the water
recedes.
changes,
They're
do you
increasing
use,
their-
then they're, either way, wouldn't your land be moving with?
But it might affect your deeded area. My guess is Carrie assesses property differently. My guess is unbuildable or
Exactly.
underwater land would probably be worth less than.
Right,
Right. I mean,
So,
that
but
probably
those
would
are
still be
because
considered
And it may,
land,
for me, I don't think it affects my recommendation. So I
Right, but I
would
think
find
if
it
it- if I
interesting.
were
but I want us to know because it has a direct impact possibly on stakeholders,
Agree.
immediate stakeholders.
Right.
And it's not, we don't have to, depending on the answer, decide one way or the other.
Yep.
But it feels irresponsible of us not to find out what kind of an impact it would be on them.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something that that Carrie or some other professional like that can come back and have some reliable representation, I think that's worthwhile.
Well, I'll stop
If we're-
by his
they're gonna
office and ask him.
Yeah, well, if it's just speculation, I mean, that wouldn't have any, wouldn't correlate to,
But it's also a legal question, do they own that land?
well,
In
that's,
this town, given, how do we define where in terms of edge of water and land
It's
under?
probably every
Maybe
deed's
by
different.
You're-
DID.
that's what, to Tyler's point, I
I
think if
guess,
the
yeah.
deeds, if there's that much variation in the deed, like usually coastal property, most of them are, they'll say to like high water mark, but then there are those anomalous ones that go back to say the low water mark.
I know, and then there are those big court cases
Yeah.
where they
Yeah,
fight and fight and fight and fight.
Yeah,
But that was, remember, Rick, you said, we assigned to you the
I
job
probably
of researching the deeds.
I got them and I think I emailed them to somebody.
Not to us.
Bina, maybe?
I think it's
Check your email,
Uh,
hold on to your
I
emails.
could.
I think it's an interesting question, but I don't think we're going to get an answer as far as the change in property values until you see how the property has changed. Period.
Well, that's why those two
Good point.
questions are side by side.
Right.
Is what changes do you anticipate, Mike, by drawing down the impoundment?
Yep.
And then having that information and being able to go to whatever authority there might be,
Right.
who can say, well, if the land goes this way, what did you say, from how many 100 feet to 40?
Yeah, I think that's
Um,
about the proportion.
Does that affect property values? We don't have to know what the amount is, Ray.
Okay.
We just
Yeah,
need to know,
okay,
is there an impact?
And Deb, you think so having a bank of a copy of every deed that abuts the river from Knowlton Street up to this, above the middle school,
The beaver dam.
the Beaver Dam.
Just-
Gee whiz. All right. I can probably go get those.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
Registry of Deeds right around the corner
I
from,
think it's important, but to know whether any decision about those impoundments will have an impact on the people who live right there.
well, maybe before he goes and does all of that, maybe we should just find out the answer to that. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know what the order should be.
Well, the reason that came up, jumped up to step one,
Mhm.
was because each deed might be separate,
Or different,
different.
yeah.
And
Okay,
I
have
certainly
you been
know,
through the
Oh, I
deeds
see what you're
and-
saying.
I
Is it
certainly know that
straight
some of these deeds that either include the dam or are close to some of these dams were originally highlighted, and we see that at the Powder Mill ruins.
Hmm.
There's very specific language in there that actually defines some sort of rights in the river to deeds, because that's where they were gaining power from.
So,
I see.
Rick, if you can, I think it would be helpful.
Some of this analysis might be underway too.
So,
I'll ask
Yeah, I
Mike
mean, I
about
don't
it,
mind,
Whatever.
I can certainly stop in and ask Harry. I'm not sure he'd be the first person I would talk to.
I think
Ask
it'd be help- I
Audra
think
too.
it'd be
Audra
helpful.
might know
Yeah.
No,
more.
and we have a good relationship, given that the reassessments at the mill.
yeah.
I was in there a lot.
So not a good relationship.
No, it is a good relationship.
That's good.
No, he doesn't leave for lunch as soon as I show up.
Gotcha.
I think it would be helpful to know when we're supposed to give the recommendation to the select board.
A date?
By March,
It's
isn't
in
it?
March, right? In
March,
At
but-
the beginning of March?
Do we
the middle of
know, like,
March,
the
end of
date?
March?
Well, it'll probably have to be, what did they say, however many days ahead of their own select board meeting, so we should probably just know what the count,
Well, they're what, the second and fourth?
right? So if they're gonna put us on the 4th, then do we need to be a week before that, or what is the lead time?
But it's
Seems
still a
like an
good
odd
question.
question.
Typically, I can answer that question, actually.
Oh, good.
Oh my gosh.
Someone came off mute up
I
here.
was gonna say,
Well, it's a safe thing. Typically, the agendas are supposed to be published
Okay.
the Friday before a select board meeting. And then the contents of that agenda are supposed to be public Monday
okay.
before the meeting. I'm pretty, that's like the latest for both.
So when is that?
I'm pretty sure we have to have the warrant last year needed to be completed in March, and I want to say it was early March. So you're probably safest to use an end of February date to come up with a recommendation. I know, that's awesome.
Can we get it, not that I don't believe you, Chris, but can we get that confirmed so that we
Please.
know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
we were planning to talk for the full month of February and then
Mhm.
scrimmage during March toward the date, but.
Yeah.
So if you could let us know for sure.
Yeah, yep,
That would be helpful.
Well, this, sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. Nope.
No, I have a long thing, if you just wanted to add to that. Okay. Okay, so this brings up what I think, which is that we don't have much time. And I feel as though the important thing for us to do is to figure out what we think our recommendations are going to be, like individually. I don't know how the process is going to go. And then have to argue our point. I think that if we did that, we would much more efficiently get to the information that we need to make the recommendation. So I think we need to start, like, I would love it if we all could come with a recommendation next meeting and then put them on the table.
A decision and rationale?
Yes.
But are we
Specific-
ready for all these questions? I mean,
But
that's,
the other might be, what does the attorney need to have from us? Maybe that's a good way to start.
What do you mean?
Well, in other words, what kinds of things does he need to know from us to come up with a warrant?
I mean, decision and a rationale,
Yeah, okay.
I would guess.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mhm.
Chris, do you know?
By the way.
But we're providing a recommendation to the select board,
Yeah,
and then they'll be working with the attorney on the wording.
exactly. That's what I would think.
I mean, I think we should be proposing, perhaps, you're thinking that we're going to be proposing verbiage for the warrant article?
I'm
Oh,
just
no,
saying, that-
no.
no,
No, I agree
No.
with you, Elfie. I think we should get it kind of nailed down
Think
what
that-
we want to
So
do
we
so
could
we can be in
separate
pursuit of
meetings, that's
that
what you
and
wanna
let
do?
go.
oh,
it's
that's
just that I think the
soon.
questions that need to be answered are questions that, for our own selves to clarify our points. And we do need to tell the public the answers to these questions, but I think that we also need to be really ready. And I think it's going to be a process to look at our potential recommendation. I have this is what I would like. I want, scenario, whatever. And these are my reasons. And then Deb has reasons for it not being that way. And we can have an actual really rubber meets the road conversation about why we are just making the decisions we're making.
Yeah,
I'm
like
just putting it
that.
out
agree.
there.
And focusing solely on Montgomery Dam for this.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, that's what we're tasked to do.
That's what we've been asked to do, right?
I would say for the time being,
I
at least
agree.
in preparation of March, yes.
But one of the reasonings might be I choose A, B, or C because I'm concerned about the whole river, right?
Mhm.
Couldn't that be
Yeah.
one of the reasons that you choose a certain scenario
Sure.
is that you have the whole watershed in mind?
So you have to be aware. I mean, it's a lovely proposal. That's what we were hoping would happen here, and there wasn't a whole lot of conversation. Exploring why you thought that was important. Given the length of our meetings, we all need to come prepared to be disciplined in the number of things we say and ask, and targeted to real understanding. Because there are 9 people around this table. And to go through, this is the recommendation, maybe limit the number of
But maybe we each get a time limit.
Yeah.
For our,
to present. But
right,
then there has to be a discussion if this is going to go anywhere. If we're trying to build a consensus around, if nothing else, the reasons that the reasons that make sense for most, if not all of us, behind a recommendation that we agree on. Because there's a choice and then there's a rationale for it. And we have to be able to do both, which means it won't take you long to say what your choice is, but it may take a while to indicate what your reasons are.
right.
And then allow everybody else around the table to question you about those.
And I kind of like they hadn't thought about this until right now. Maybe we don't have to come to a consensus. Maybe we can have dissenting opinion, but maybe we operate as if we need to come to a consensus.
Well, absolutely. I think that's the goal.
Yeah.
And then depending on how the numbers come out, there could be a majority report and then there could be a
Minority report.
or dissenting, just like our Supreme Court.
Yeah.
There could be. But I don't think the select board wants 9 different recommendations.
No.
Syria.
I'm just saying we've been talking
Didn't even
about the
come up
fact
with 9
that there
different
can be a dissenting. I just think
Well,
we
there
need to
can
have it
be.
in mind that we're
Right.
trying to come to a
No,
consensus.
but I think you try to come to consensus, try to understand each other, and resolve any differences. And if we can't, we can't.
Mhm.
But until we try and use the time, limited time, thank you, Chris, limited time we have now available, which is December and January, to come up with something that's 2 hour and 45-minute meetings, unless we agree to try to meet more.
We might have to
And I think we may have to,
write the recommendation too. I think would have to.
because we're not going to meet again until
That's a lot.
December 11th.
Yeah, I think it's
And I can take this list of what we want to know and try to find answers to those questions and send them out.
That should be our goal for our next meeting.
Well, I've got good news too, by the way. I just went through the last year's, when did we finally vote as a select board on the town warrant articles? And this means they were done, baked, and probably decided on beforehand. But they were April 18th is when we had to do our final vote for, this is exactly what they are. There usually is 1 or 2 meetings of discussion prior to that date.
So you're probably still
So-
early March.
You're still early March.
Maybe it's middle of March instead of end of February, but
But I think, Alfie, I think your recommendation is good. I think we're at a point where we need to start doing that and have those hard
And
conversations.
you're saying next meeting do that, or next meeting we talk, because during this meeting, it seems like there's a lot of questions. And I personally would like some of those answered before I
The ones
can,
that we wrote
give
up
my
here, I
spiel.
will try to get an answer to. That's what I just said.
right, what I'm asking is, are we supposed to give our spiels next in
Some of
December?
us, yeah.
Really?
We won't get.
I feel like
online.
that's a little premature if we haven't answered a lot of these questions yet.
Would your recommendation change based on those answers?
My reasonings would, yeah.
Your reasons.
So I'd have a better understanding of what's going on and the costs and the, all that, the impacts, the vulnerability. I just think if we want concise presentations at this point, I need more information. That's, up to all of us, I
Well,
guess,
it's
as
also
individuals,
possible
but
that during the discussions, new things may occur to each of us. And so I don't consider this first run to be polished presentation.
Exactly.
I'd like to start to hash them out.
Exactly,
Okay.
and I think it's the
Yeah, I think-
basis for conversation, and we can, out of those can come,
Mhm.
well, we need to know this,
Right.
because there's obviously a difference of opinion.
Mhm.
But, I mean,
Okay.
I'm totally. in-
there is a difference between where I'm heading now and the exact, I think I'm thinking too far ahead on the exact recommendations that I want that to be very thorough. And we need details and,
Oh, yeah.
to back them up. But, if we
I
all
think in this
have
moment, it's
opinions
just
that are
being-
forming, we can talk about those
But in the interest
opinions.
of time, the more we know about what is going on for each of us, the more we can figure out which of those things we really need to resolve or figure out or get
Yep, I agree.
information about. But
So-
I really think we need to start.
I'm going to cut you off, Deb,
Good.
because
Oh, yeah.
we need to make sure that we get questions from the public.
Yep.
So let's open that up. for
Can I
questions.
really quickly just
Oh, yeah.
clarify something before we move on? There was a question about leadership here. And because we had that conversation of who would sort of take over while we were out on the grass and it wasn't a recorded meeting, I thought it was worth having on record that Deb is the person sort of running this ship, so that if anybody from public needs to reach out to us, they know kind of who the contact point is. Not to say that we can't answer also, but we know amongst ourselves how we're operating, but just to make that a little more clear to others.
And we have a rotating chair.
As well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
My name's Robert Nichols, and I have a good input on that code. And Knowlton Street Dam is a very interesting, I think it's an interview report, that the most rivers that come out of a mountain, the mountain is hard, it's rock, and then down when they get to the coast, it's soft rock. This river is different because it's soft rock at the top, and then there's hard rock, metamorphic, which was pushed against where approximately Knowlton Street is, and it goes down a lot steeper, and it doesn't wear away, but it holds back what's behind it. The soft rock is generating sand, and the sand is impounded behind that natural hard rock there. And so it's not just junk that's in there. It's part of the, normally there would be an estuary down at the harbor, but the estuary is uphill. So it's something very important in the physics of the river. Second thing is the dams are built on ledges, and there's a quote in one of the things by Allison. She says, everywhere that you take a dam out, there will be a ledge with a waterfall. So you have the conundrum of whether you blow the waterfall up and take it out of there, or you leave it natural. And then the Montgomery Dam, you were talking about what happens if you took the dam down, and would the buildings be safe or not? In the Gartley and Dorsey portion, they say that taking the dam out would create potential scouring of the foundations of the buildings. If you look at the dam now during a big storm, the waterfalls are just ravaging. But behind the dam, it's very calm, and that's protecting those buildings. That dam is protecting the buildings. And if you take the dam out, those buildings are going to be in the middle of a giant waterfall. And that's not resiliency to me. And the last thing I have is, I believe it was Nate Gray said that he had looked at a lot of groups like this. He says the best results come when it's a bottom-up direction, not a top-down. And he very emphasized that. What we have here is a top-down direction coming to the town to tell them what they want. What we don't have is a bottom-up part of this. You give the citizens 2 minutes to talk, and maybe my time's up, but it's going the wrong way. How many people would come from the town and say, well, we need fish ladders, or we need to take out the sand that's behind, the whatever. Those things, that's real demand from the citizens and addressing what the citizens want and not trying to guess. Right now you're guessing what the citizens want. I'm a stakeholder. I live right above Knox Mill Dam and right across from Deb. So I have a real feeling for the river, and I watch it go up and down. And one last thing, the flooding. A large part of flooding is because we've run all of our, not all, but most of our storm sewer systems into the river. So when we have a big storm, you have a lot more water coming into the river than just coming out of the watershed. You have it coming off the streets. And that's where, like Asheville, you'd get potential large flooding. And that's what my particular points.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Behind you.
Oh,
That's that microphone. Perfect. Thank you.
we only get one microphone.
Yeah, Tom Zumwalt. My position right along has been that we should find a way to do both. We should find a way to do a fish way of some sort, but also keep the waterfall. It would be nice if we could keep the dam, but particularly interested in keeping the waterfall. And I think that means I'm in favor of option B or option 2, whichever it is. And I think I just don't, from what I can make out of it, it's very hard to make out what it's going to look like, but from what I can make out, based on the information that's been available so far, is not going to be very attractive. It's going to be a lot of stone and concrete, and it's going to require a lot of maintenance. I think there are better options actually that have been around since the Interfleet report. Is there going to be any time when those options can be discussed by the public, or at least the public that's interested?
Are you talking about the ones at the back of one of those reports that had an island?
Yes,
The water flowed on both sides?
yes. A variation on that theme.
Yeah.
So is there, I mean, you're getting so short on time. Here we are at the last minute, and we haven't even, again, going back to, this should have been open to the public a year, 2 years ago. But for some reason that didn't happen.
But it wasn't, so do you have suggestions for how we could?
Yes, so that's my question. Now we're down to, we've got, you have 2, maybe 3 meetings before you have to come up with what you're going to put on the warrant. Is there going to be time for that sort of thing? That's my question.
Thanks. Thanks. I kind of have a segue from what Tom said. Ken Gross, and I'm speaking as a private citizen. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board that is the select board. I'm not representing any position of the select board. And I actually have a question similar to Tom's question. So the scenarios are, do you number them or letter them? I can't remember if it's choice A, B, and C. Okay, so I will call this A2, which would be save the dam and build a fish ladder. So the question is that scenario has not been pursued, and is that because you don't like it or because you've been told that it's an impossibility? So that really is a question. I don't know if you have. Oh, and also I'm very impressed by the number of things you guys are going to try to cover between now and February.
So are we.
Yeah.
I think if I can answer, I thought that suddenly feel really loud. The idea of the fish passage with the dam as is was less not impossible, but less of a feasible option because of the gradient that would be required to be met with that option. So you could still have a fish ladder that does that, but if you're talking about option B not looking particularly attractive already because it's this sort of, large structure, if you now have one that has to meet a higher grade, then you have to take up more space to do that. So you're maybe looking at one that zigzags or takes up more space in Harbor Park. So in a lot of ways that seemed less ideal because of the way that would be put into action. So I think that was sort of why that wasn't.
So what I'm concerned about is that the townspeople were faced with a straight binary choice: save the dam or not. And so, which means save the dam means there's no chance of a fish ladder. And on behalf of the town, I would like to avoid that binary choice of saying one thing or the other. People are kind and generous, and they're always looking for a solution which will satisfy two things at once. So,
Yeah, I think that would be an important qualifier then. If you decide to keep the dam, does that mean that fish passage is forever off the table? Because I'm not sure that that's right. Yeah.
We haven't seen a model that makes it look feasible. And that's one of my questions is there a way to do fish passage, leaving the dam intact at its current height?
There is a way. It's just that.
No, but feasible, meaning would it work?
Right.
And what difference would that make, given confirmation of the fish passage? What would that do to water flow?
Right. And it would also be a question with the library board. Are you willing to put in a fish passage that takes up that much space compared to this much space? Yeah. So.
And would it be funded? Would the funders be
How
interested?
effective is that
If
fish
it's-
ladder? Well,
that's the question. If it's not effective, it won't be funded.
Is how effective it would be.
Yeah.
It's nice to say you have a fish ladder, but if no fish will go up it.
What's the point? Yeah.
There is a risk that we tear out the entire river and all the dams and all the little falls, and we end up with something that doesn't work. We're putting fish ladders, and there's a high risk that we end up with something that works. The only comments I keep hearing over and over again is we need the fish ladders for funding, and that offends me as the person who cares about the river. It's not about the funding, about what makes sense for the river. If we're gonna take the dams out and there's still ledges where there's a waterfall and fish can't get up, we blow up the waterfall. That's not nature, that's us, we're just building a ditch.
But I don't think that's what my understanding and the rest of the group confirm or not. The plans that are in place are not anticipating fish not being able to get up a damless water state.
Deb, I'm going to cut you off because we got one more
Yeah.
comment here from the public.
Philip Conkling here. Thank you. My comment is that I think the public needs better guidance and language from this group when you get to your recommendation about flood impacts under climate change scenarios. And I hope you will get rid of this 100-year, some kind of, or 200-year or 500-year, and go and look at and get recommendations from hydrologists about what a flood of, so many inches over so many hours. That's really where where the risks are. They're going to be high impact, short duration risks where water comes very fast, into the river. And you need to be able to communicate that better to the public so that the options are clearer to people and the risks are clearer.
Yeah, I think that those qualifiers for those terms are already in place, so it would just be a matter of taking out the label of 100-year storm and changing it to over 2 inches in a 24-hour period or whatever the qualification
Or
is.
4 inches in,
Right. So that,
12 hours.
because those parameters are already in place. It's just a matter of changing
Because people are reading it in the newspapers, with every big, climate event.
Right.
And so we kind of know it's coming, but we don't know what it's modeled to look like.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask Tom, would you,
It's 6 o'clock. Yeah.
No, it
I
turns
just
out
have
that that
one-
was when I thought the meeting was on Tuesday.
I just have one question for you, and because I really want to know what you think we could do as a committee to have more of a bottom-up approach, because we think we're inclusive and we're trying our best to include the public, and we've invited the public to our meetings, and we have a email, contact that you can send. I'm just really curious, like, what else could we be doing? We had the, 2 community meetings, but how could we improve? If you have any ideas.
The way the situation is now, there's not a whole lot because of the time limitations. And that was my question was, can you find some time between now and February or March, whenever it is, to have more public input? The answer is that this should have happened. I mean, this is finally, we had 2 actual meetings that were open to the public, and now we're allowing quite a bit of time here tonight. This should have started at least a year ago. The information
That's-
It
the
did.
Yeah, we
information
did.
that's pertinent for the area that everybody gets upset about, which is the Montgomery Dam and the waterfront, was available. It's all available in the interfluve report. And that's been here for 4 years.
There was a series of meetings starting in 2021, I think.
2021, is that the very first one that was down there? That was,
held, actually, they started during the pandemic. And
Right.
so it had to all be on Zoom. And then they had those are all on tape and available. But the point is just that there was an attempt to talk with the public 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
well, I don't, okay, my comment on that is just that I don't think there was enough advance notice to the public, because I remember, I had just moved here and I was interested. I was really interested in this whole thing. And I got the paper delivered in the mail at that point, and it arrived late. By the time the paper got there announcing the meeting, it was over. So that was the problem with that. And
No, because we weren't. pulled
Yeah, we
together.
weren't
no, you weren't,
involved yet.
that was, but I kind of object to counting that as a lot of public input, in that the public really wasn't notified about those meetings appropriately anyway.
We've had many newsletters and we've tried really
Newsletters, yes.
our best.
And that-
We really have. And I want to say that our recent community meetings, those were pushed back pretty far for us. We wanted them earlier as well, but we needed first to get the engineering reports on the different scenarios. So that's what we were kind of given.
I think it's
And
also.
moving forward, we'll do, I think, more community meetings and get more input.
I would also say that we as a committee are a representation of the citizens of this community. So we are not somehow separate from the individuals who are not on this committee. We also come with the same concerns and thoughts that you all have. So we're not some separate entity that doesn't represent the people of the town.
Yeah, we weren't imported. I know, Tom, what I might be able to do is find out, because I don't know, what happened to those diagrams, because they were part of the original report.
I discussed this with Mike Burke, and
What did he say?
basically it's a long discussion, but they were looking at that as 2 different ways of doing full dam removal, as opposed to the way I think they should look at that is using the one with the island as an option to option B, another.
Keeping the dam.
No,
Or
actually,
shrinking the
no,
dam.
I'm sorry. I don't think you can keep the dam. I mean, okay, yeah, you could keep the dam, but it would require just because of the added 10-foot there, or 8-foot, whatever it is, that translates into a much bigger, longer, more expensive fishway. Whereas I think you could accomplish it. Well, anyway,
But did he explain why they dispensed with those?
he
diagrams?
it was obvious that it kind of just slipped under the rug, that he said they thought that the force of the river coming down there, if they built the island, it might just push the island to one side, and so basically that it was there were too many questions. And so they just decided to go with run it straight down through Harbor Park, Lower Harbor Park.
We have hit 6 o'clock, you guys.
Yep. I do have to say a correction in what I said with April 18. April 18 was 2023. I was looking at the wrong year. Sorry, I went back in time too far. But I also did see last year, 2020, in this 2024, March 19 is when we held public hearings on the warrant articles that at that point were short-term rentals and something else. And there is a timeline that's necessary for warrant articles and public hearings. I'll endeavor to get more specific details of what it would look like this year, but know that at least last year, the public hearing for the warrant articles on short-term rentals was March 19.
Yeah, and last year, Audra had a single sheet that had basically by this date, X, by this date,
Yeah.
Y, and so on. And I'm sure she has a working version of that already going for this year. Be good to see that.
Yeah.
It'd be good to see it.
All right.
Our next meeting
I'm such a
is
person.
December 11th. That's what we're looking at right now, 4 o'clock. Seth, I believe you are the rotating chair for that meeting.
Good thing we figured out the email issue.
That's right.
Wait a minute. It doesn't mean that I'm going to get stuck with the difficult meeting.
Yeah. Put the lawyer in charge.
No, you,
It's all
that's
part
gonna
of our
have the
master
first
plan.
difficult one.
Any other comments before we adjourn?
No.
You did an excellent job with presentations, I will say. The presentations
Yes.
during
thank
those
you.
things, I was
Way to
impressed.
Go, Ellen.
Not that it matters, but
Thank you. I missed what he said.
I'm pretty picky when it comes to presentations, and I couldn't have done a better job.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, again, not that I'm any great shakes, but yeah, I thought it was, you presented the facts as they are known. And even though some people might be disappointed that you didn't have all the answers, that's kind of was the point too, that we don't. That here's your chance to ask. So hopefully people will ask more.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, I think we're
Move to
adjourned.
adjourn. All in favor?
Thank you.
Turn your microphone on, please.